Welcome to this week's Who the Folk podcast, sponsored by Gold Group Realty. I'm Lonnie Goldsmith, the editor of TC Jewfolk. This week we're joined by Ronen Pink, a college student with a 3D printer who has started producing much-needed face shields for organizations throughout the Twin Cities. We talk about what inspired him, what the challenges are, and how long he can keep this work up on this week's Who the Folk podcast. Ronen Pink, welcome to this week's Who the Folk podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Lonnie. I appreciate it.
So we wanted to have you on. We had you had been suggested as somebody who should be on the podcast because you have started over the course of the last little while making your own protective shield masks with a 3D printer. So I guess for starters, how long have you had a 3D printer? And I can't imagine this is what you thought you'd be making with it, right?
Yeah, so I got a 3D printer for my I used my bar mitzvah money. I did a bunch of research, and I've always been super into 3D printing, biomedical engineering. I'm not a biomedical engineer, but just building has always been a big passion of mine. So I got a 3D printer when I was probably 13 or 14 after my bar mitzvah. And I messed around with it for a really long time. And then since COVID happened, I've started making protective face shields.
So let's go back for a sec. You mentioned you're not, biomedical engineer. You are a 21-year-old student. You're at the University of Miami in Florida, although right now back up here in Minnesota. What are you studying?
So I'm actually studying. It's called business technology management, which is the business side of computer science, essentially, and business management, kind of focusing on organizational behavior. And then I'm minoring in religious studies with a focus on American Judaism.
Okay. So what had you been using your 3D printer for? Like before this all happened, you did the research, you wanted to have one. What had you been making with it?
I've just been so there's a bunch of different kind of websites and forums that have people's already made design files. So I've made and printed and designed. I made a batarang because I thought that'd be really fun. I made a little 3D print of myself. I found software, I scanned myself, and I made a little kind of action figure of myself. I've made a flower pot that I plan on planting when I get back to Miami with some succulents. I've just kind of made a bunch of random things, and anything I think of that I think would be fun. The 3D printer kind of allows you to do that. So the sky's the limit when it comes to random things that I just want to have in my room.
That's so cool. So I know that one of the things with the COVID era that we're living in right now is that really nobody has enough PPE, personal protective equipment. And so at what point when this all started did you decide that you were going to figure out how to print your own?
So probably week 2 into quarantine, kind of stay at home orders, my mom sent me an article saying that the National Institute of Health had come out with a file that's acceptable for kind of home 3D print enthusiasts to use and make, and that would be acceptable according to homemade PPE standards for use. So 2 weeks in or so, I got the file. I was a little skeptical, and then I realized just the enormity of the issue, and I started printing. And once I found a place to give it to, I shipped as many as I could and printed as many as I could.
How long does it take to print one?
So it takes about 3.5 hours. It's not a fast process. It takes about 3.5 hours to print one mask. So I wake up, I start the print, and I go to bed, and I stop the print, and I probably get 5 in a day.
Wow. That's quite the long slog to try to get, even a handful done.
Yes.
But fortunately, you have nowhere else to go.
Exactly. Like fortunately, I have nothing but time on my hands, and I'm able to do some work and do some good, and it's really not too hard for me. So I'm happy to help.
So, what's the material? Like, I sort of know what 3D printing is, sort of as a concept, but it doesn't take like ink like a regular home printer would, because obviously this is not what you would consider just a regular home
Right.
machine, right? And
Right.
these are not things that most people have. So, what are the material that is used to print? How's, I guess, the process work?
So there's a bunch of different types of plastic that it takes. My printer takes ABS and PLA plastic. If you think of the same plastic that Legos are made out of, it's that plastic, but it's rolled, but it's in kind of a long spool, the same way you'd think of yarn. It's
Okay.
a giant like yarn spool, but it's plastic. Um,
Huh.
yeah, and then the printer itself, the way that a regular printer works, right? It prints on an x-axis and a y-axis. Um, but a 3D printer prints on the x-axis, a y-axis, and a z-axis, so up and down.
Okay.
So little layer by little layer, it kind of stacks on top of each other. So as the plastic comes out, it's heated to 200 degrees Celsius, um, and it kind of cools rapidly, so it's able to build layers on each other, and build upwards, essentially.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
That's really cool. So you had, where have you been giving the shield masks that you've made so far to? Where have they gone?
So I've I originally reached out to Shalom Home, which is coincidentally just right across the street from me, and where
Okay.
my grandfather lived before he passed away. And I reached out to them, and they happily and excitedly took them. So I gave them, I think, 20 or 25 masks. And then they said that they got a donation from Stratasys, which is also a big biomedical engineering company that has been 3D mass producing 3D printed face shields. And they're actually an Israeli company, so they're doing really fantastic things. And since then, I've donated to the University of Minnesota Physicians and the and a Muslim community that needed some protective shields for their clinics that my rabbi at Adath actually put me in touch with.
That's fascinating. I think the most, I think probably shocking thing you said was that you donated some to the University of Minnesota.
Yeah,
How? I mean, I guess that's sort of proof that nobody's getting enough of this, right?
yeah. No one is getting enough, and everyone. It's actually really interesting because the the materials needed to print protective face shields are almost out of stock everywhere because so many people are trying to do the same thing that I am around the country. But it's unfortunate that everyone needs them, and there aren't enough to go around. So I'm just trying my best with what I have.
So that's got to be the next sort of challenge, is making sure that you can re up your supplies whenever you need to.
Right. So fortunately, I've been able to find a good amount of plastic, and it's been coming in every once in a while. And I'm also very fortunate that I just actually got a um, a loan from my old high school. They lent me their 3D printer and a bunch of their plastic, so that I can continue and kind of ramp up production, and make even more masks than I currently was.
That's amazing. So you've got two different machines working now.
Yeah, so I have two different machines working, and my mom actually put a mass kind of Facebook post out there to say, "Hey, does anyone else have a 3D printer? Is anyone else willing to help with this?" And a friend of a friend got in contact with me, and he's out in Blaine. He's a pilot that's currently not working, and he is also producing masks and giving them to me, and I'm assembling them and then giving them to communities in need.
The spring real estate market is just heating up, and the team at Gold Group Realty would love an opportunity to help you navigate your way into the house of your dreams. Reach out to any of their outstanding agents, whose contact information is available at www.thegold.group.
That's incredible. So you mentioned the assembling. How how does that work? What's the assembly part after the actual plastic of the face shield is printed out?
Yeah, so the part that I'm printing is kind of the thing that combines the three pieces together. So the part that I'm printing essentially is the part that goes around the forehead, and then you can actually buy kind of um, those clear plastic binder protectors, or like binder separators, and those are acceptable to use for PPE given the circumstances. And we got a donation of 50 yards of elastic, and those are being used as kind of the back strap. So what I do is I print the headband part, and then I
Okay.
combine the plastic, the clear plastic that we can just buy from Office Max, and the elastic that's been donated, and I put it all together.
Wow. That's amazing. Now, I've heard, and again, from a really good source, my wife who sews, just the cotton masks, for when we have to go
Yeah,
to a grocery shopping, that, uh, and I've seen elsewhere that the elastic itself is really hard to come by now also.
yeah. No, the elastic is essentially sold out everywhere. We were super fortunate to get a donation. Um, Say this was, I'm blanking on his name. I can send it to you later, but the um, he's a wholesale fabric person in Minneapolis, and he donated. He had two 50-yard rolls left, and he donated one of them to us, so that we can continue making these face shields, which is really something amazing and very generous.
And I can give the shout out since I have the email in front of me from your mom, Scott Harris from SR Harris.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, yes, a place where my wife has been to buy fabric, and I have gone with, and it is a very overwhelming place to go. But it is amazing that he was able to come through and help you out in that way.
Yeah.
Now I know you mentioned your mom had put posted on Facebook. Have you found in looking around that there's sort of this large community of hobbyists basically that are doing this?
Yeah, so I haven't found so much in Minneapolis. Um, I know that almost every high school nowadays has a 3D printer. Almost every middle school nowadays has a 3D printer. I personally haven't come across too many, um, just people and hobbyists with 3D printers. There are forums, and there are kind of chat rooms, but I haven't really accessed them. I know I have a friend in Atlanta who is essentially doing the same thing that I am, and he found a group of like 100 3D printer hobbyists, and they're mass producing masks as fast as they possibly can, and they're working with um, local wholesalers, and they're really doing amazing things down in Atlanta. But I haven't found that in Minneapolis yet.
Well, it's amazing that you found so many people, even outside this community, that are doing it because it's obviously a huge need, and it's good to see people putting the skill they have to do this mitzvah to put this to good use because obviously there are so many communities who need it.
Yeah, it's really it's the little thing that you're able to do that really makes a big difference, and you can really see the difference, given the circumstances. So it's nice to see kind of a big community of helpers, and I appreciate you kind of reaching out to highlight my story.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I think more people should get to know the story. If people have a 3D printer and for some reason hadn't heard about this type of thing with printing PPE, where can people go to get the approved template to get started if they want to?
Yeah, so the National Institute of Health, if you search National Institute of Health 3D print exchange, they have an entire website of designs that have been clinically tested and approved for production of PPEs. So that's really how I found it, and millions of people are doing the same thing that I am.
Well, that's amazing. It's great to see just average people step up in such a time of need, because I think all of us, especially as this got started, I think there's sort of a feeling of helplessness to the situation, that we want to do something, but we're not really sure what we can do or
Yeah,
the best way to help. And I think this is such an easy, well, it's an easy thing to get started with if you can, if you have a pretty 3D printer, or if you can find a 3D printer, and if you can find the materials,
right,
which is sort of a whole other problem.
right. The materials right now is the hardest thing for me, because there's always going to be, or at least until this is over, there's always going to be a need, but finding materials is increasingly harder and harder because so many people are trying to help.
So how long are you set up for in terms of materials? How long can you do this for until you run out?
That's a great question. I think, I mean, obviously, I'm going to keep trying to find plastic, and really that's the only thing that is the thing that I need more of at the moment. I think I have probably another 30 masks before I run out. But obviously, I'm going to try to find more plastic.
Well, that's it's amazing. I guess you'll keep checking Amazon, and keep checking all with all your contacts out there, and see who's got some extra.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's awesome. Well, Ronen Pink, I'll give you last two questions, non 3D printing related for you.
Okay.
What is your favorite Jewish holiday?
Yom Kippur, hands down.
How come?
Yom Kippur is my favorite. I think I've always been someone that really values introspection and self-reflection, and Yom Kippur is really a lot about that, but also the weight and the gravity behind it, and the memories I have of being at synagogue with my family and with my grandparents and listening to the choir. It carries a lot of weight for me, and it carries a lot of powerful Jewish experiences. Even if I don't connect with the words that I'm saying, I connect with the atmosphere of Yom Kippur.
Okay, that's very cool. And what is your favorite Jewish food?
There's so many amazing Jewish foods, and especially now when everyone is kind of seeking comfort, Jewish food is comfort food.
Yes, it is.
I love kreplach. Um, I love kreplach, and I love brisket. Those are probably my two favorite Jewish foods, just because they're just delicious, and
They are.
you can have it all the time and be content.
No question. Kreplach is excellent. Not enough. When asking that question, not enough people pick that answer.
Yes, kreplach is something that I don't think very many people really know about, but once you know about it, it's delicious.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Ronen Pink, thank you so much for coming on to talk about all of this outstanding work, and best of luck with continuing this mitzvah that you are doing, and hopefully materials will continue to come available so you can continue this. But thanks again for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for listening, and thanks to Gold Group Realty for sponsoring this week. If you haven't yet, please subscribe, rate, and review the show. If you have someone who you think should be on the podcast, please email me at editor@tcjewfolk.com. The Who the Folk podcast is a product of Jewfolk Inc. and part of the Jewfolk Podcast Network. For more shows, check out tcjewfolk.com/podcast.